Hey guys, so this video will be a complete course about how to use Google Sheets with Make.com. I chose Google Sheets because a lot of people rely on it, from regular people up to Fortune 500 companies. It is actually estimated that Google Sheets has 200 million monthly users, which is huge. In case you're new to this channel, I teach people how to make money using AI and automation. In this course, I will do a detailed explanation of all the Google Sheets modules in Make.com. I actually prepared for you a mega pack of 37 Make.com blueprints, and you will be able to download them for free by going to my Discord server. The link will be in the description. I believe this pack has a lot of value and will help you automate a lot of stuff using Google Sheets. Also, make sure to stay till the end of the video because I will have two challenges for you where you will have to do advanced automations using Google Sheets and Make.com. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Okay guys, so if you want to follow along with me, just log into your Make.com account and then create a Google Sheets spreadsheet here, brand new one that you can see here, and then you will be able to basically just do whatever I'm doing for each of the Google Sheets module. First of all, when we open Google Sheets module, there are a lot of functions that we can play with. There is actually a total of 27 functions, but there are two categories of functions, what we call triggers and what we call actions. So triggers are basically just Make.com waiting for something to happen, like an event. For example, there is a change in a cell, or there is a new row that is added, so that this event triggers something in Make.com that will basically start your automation. So this is the first category of functions. The second one is the actions. So basically when you want to act on a spreadsheet without waiting for something to happen. Some examples of triggers are watch new rows, watch changes, and also perform a function. And the actions are basically just all the rest of the functions. So search rows, clear row, update a cell, those are all actions basically. I will first start with simple stuff, and then slowly we will start, complexifying a little bit the actions and the automations that we will be doing. Okay, so the first function that was interesting for me to play with is this trigger, watch changes. And here it says triggers when a cell is updated and that there is an add-on that is required. So I will walk you through how to do it. As you can see here, I already have the add-on installed, but I will show you how to do it. First of all, you just click on add-ons and then you click on get add-ons. Here you will simply type make, press enter, and then here you will just select this one. You can see here that it is installed for me, and then here you should see the button install. So you just press on it and it will install Make.com add-on on your Google Sheet. Once it is installed, just go back to extensions, make for Google Sheets, and then click on settings. It will open a tab on the side, as you can see here, and basically this area has two parts. The first one is about the watch changes, trigger that we just discussed, and another one called perform a function that we'll see later on. Here it says, please make sure you are using your default Google account when setting up the Make for Google Sheets add-on. This just means that the same Google account should be used for this Google Sheet, and the connection between Google Sheets and Make.com that you will be making when using modules. I will show you that in a moment. Here you can fill in 3 fields. However, only one is required, which is the webhook URL. And we will see from where this webhook URL should come from. Here, going back to your scenario, just click on Watch Changes, and here click on Create a webhook. Just name it whatever you want, and then click on Save. Now, this URL webhook will appear here. Just copy it by clicking here, and then paste it here. Here, the two optional inputs are the sheet and the range. And actually, you should use them only if you want to restrict, the monitoring of the changes to a specific area within your spreadsheet. So if you want to focus, if you have, for example, 10 sheets, and in a particular sheet you want to only monitor a specific area within that sheet, then use those options. Otherwise, if you feel like it doesn't matter really, just leave those fields empty basically. Now to verify that this function works, let's set the result of the change into a variable. So now you should click on Tools, and here you should just click on Set Variable. Concerning the variable name, just name it whatever you want. And here for the variable value, select Value here. And then press on OK. Now before running this automation, we should save those settings. Okay, so now we can run it. So click on Run once and then click on Wait for new data. So here let's write a new value. For example, here I will write test new value and then you click Enter. Okay, so now let's analyze what happened. We can see that in the output of this module, it has recorded the range of the change, which is A1, and the new value, which is test new value. And we can see that indeed this variable, watch change var, has the new value, test new value. Okay, so now it's good. We know that it's working. But how in practice it could help us, in a real business automation? I prepared a scenario where this could be really useful. So imagine you have a YouTube bot that go and grabs the transcripts of YouTube videos, and you want that every time a transcript is added to a Google Sheet, you want to fill in the summary of that transcript in a new cell. And basically, I prepared some data here. I'm a huge fan of the My First Million podcast. So I prepared, 3 rows where we have the title, the link, and some other information. And for the transcript, we have the whole transcript for those 2 videos, as you can see here, and the summary for them as well. So now we will build a little automation so that every time we will put a transcript in a cell, it will automatically generate and fill a summary in the cell next to it. Going back to our scenario, we'll get rid of this module here, and instead of that module, we'll use a ChatGPT module. We'll use the create a completion function. For the model, I like to use GPT-4o. For the role, let's set it to system. And basically for the message content, we will instruct the AI to basically produce a summary of a YouTube video that it will receive. So our prompt will be, I will give you the transcript of a YouTube video from a channel called My First Million, and you will have to summarize it via 4 sentences maximum. This channel consists of 2 hosts discussing new business ideas based on trends and opportunities they see in the market. Here's the transcript, and here we should select value so that we will get the transcript from the Google Sheet. Here let's just set 0 as the max tokens, and then we'll click on OK. Next, we want to take the output from ChatGPT and then update a specific cell using that output. So we'll be selecting Google Sheets module and more specifically update a cell. Here I like to select my spreadsheet by looking for it because it's just easier for me. So the file is called tutorial Google Sheets. Here it is. Just select the sheet name. Here for the cell we'll be updating J4, and for the value that will be written, it will be a result from the OpenAI endpoint. And then you click on OK. Okay, so now let's run the automation. Click on Run once and then wait for new data. And here I will just paste the transcript. I already have it, so I will hit Enter. Okay, so it looks like the automation has worked. Let's double check here. Okay, we can see that the summary has been outputted by ChatGPT, and we can see that the summary has indeed been written in this cell. So if we double click, we can see that the summary seems accurate. Okay, so now the next function that I want to show you is the watch new rows. So let's select it. So this function actually works differently than the watch changes because we do not rely on a webhook. However, we must choose the Google Sheets file and basically whether this Google Sheet contains headers or not, and the maximum number of results to be worked, to output during a run of this function. Basically, this function will monitor all the sheets and will get basically all the data that has been added in a new row. So I prepared this little table here where we have the first name, last name, and lead score. We want to add this data, Tom Cruise and 8, to this table and get it by setting multiple variables in our Meg.com automation. So here we will select our spreadsheet. Make sure to select the right sheet name. Here we should indicate that yes, this table contains headers. For the range of the monitoring, we know that here it concerns only the columns A, B, and C. So let's just set here A1 up to C1. And for this limit here, it depends on your specific use case. So if you want to receive only one row at a time, just make sure that here we'll set it to 1. However, if for your use case you know that you will receive, for example, a batch of 10 new rows or 20 new rows, just adapt this number and set the right number here basically. And then let's press OK. Here we should also select starting from which row we should let Meg.com know that it should start watching for those new rows. Here just select all and then press on OK. And then we'll want to set multiple variables to get the first name, the last name, and the lead score. So now here just select set multiple variables. And let's start adding those variables. So here click on add item. Here let's call it first name. And then click on fname here. And then do the rest. And then click on OK. An important thing that we should notice for this watch new rows is that the way it works is that the changes should first happen in the Google Sheets and then we should trigger this function. So first now let's add new data to this table. So now that we added a new row, let's run our automation. So now we can see that indeed the variables have been set to the right values. So first name LeBron, last name James, and score of 10. So now the main difference between the previous function watch changes and this one watch new rows is that if you want to get only one cell data at a time, then use the previous one, watch changes. Otherwise, if you want to get a whole row in a table, then it's better to use this one. Now the next function that we'll be seeing is add a row. It is pretty simple to use. So here as usual, let's select our spreadsheet. As you can see here, if you indicate that the table contains headers, we will see that the names of those columns are automatically detected by Meg.com. So now let's add new data to this table. For this last option, unformatted, it means that if you insert some special data, for example, a formula or a link, if you select yes, it means that Google Sheets will not automatically transform them in the way they should be. So in summary, if you want to insert, for example, a link and you want Google Sheets to recognize it as a clickable link, then select no here. And then let's press OK. Okay, let's just run it quickly. And we can see that the data has been added. Now let's move on to the next function, which is update a row. So here the information that this function needs is the row number. So here, for example, for this row number 7, let's update this row by writing, for example, Salma Hayek instead of Jennifer Lopez. If you want some cell to remain unchanged, just leave the input as it is, which means empty. Once you're done with your changes, just click on OK. And then let's run this function. we can see that the changes have indeed been made. The next function that we will see is clear a row, which just erases the data from that specific row. Similarly to the previous function, we also need here the row number. We don't need any additional information. So here let's set the number 7 as well. Let's click on OK and let's run it. Now we see that on row number 7 the data is cleared out. The next function that we'll see is delete a row. So this function is pretty self-explanatory. So if we decide to delete this row, number 4, which means we'll end up with a table where we have the row Chris Tucker and then Tom Cruise in it. So here let's input 4, press OK, run it. Yep, we can see that the row has been deleted. Now let's move on to the functions about cells, which means the ones that allow you to get, update or clear a cell. Let's start with getting data from a cell. So here the only input that you need is the cell ID, meaning a letter for the columns and a number for the row. So here let's get the data at cell A2, which means Michael. And then to double check that it is working well, we could either just check the output from the module or set the data to a variable. So let's just do the latter, which means we'll here click on this and then set variable. For the variable name, let's write whatever we want. And for the value, here let's just click on value from the previous module. And then let's click on OK. So here, let's run it. So we can see that here as an output, we have first name variable is equal to Michael. So it's working well. Now we'll be updating a cell. So we don't need this module anymore. So here we'll be updating the same cell at A2, but instead of Michael, let's just write, for example, Samuel or something. Here let's write the new value. Let's write Samuel, for example, and then OK. Let's run it. Okay, great. Now moving on to clearing a cell. Here let's clear this cell, which is at C2. Let's press OK. Then let's run it. We can see that indeed the data has been cleared out. Now let's move on to the functions that are related to a range of values within a spreadsheet. So here we need to input the range of the data that we want. So a range is basically a starting cell and then a column and then an ending cell. So for example, if we want to get this range of values, the starting cell will be A5 and then the ending cell will be C5. So let's write here this range. Here, based on my experience, we should just leave this option as no, so that everything will work out smoothly. So now let's press OK. Here, since the range is about 3 values, we should set those values into multiple variables. So here let's click on set multiple variables. So for example, for the first variable, first name, let's write it here, and then for the variable value, let's click on A. And then you keep doing the same for the 2 other variables. So now let's run the automation and see if it works. Okay, great. We see that here in the output, we have successfully set the values to the variables. So now, as you can imagine, for this function, the range is not necessarily a row. It can be an area, for example, this area where we'll be getting all the first name and last names of those 2 rows. And in this case, for the range, the starting cell would be A4 and the ending cell would be B5. So here let's write A4 and then here B5 and then OK. Now I deleted the multiple variables setting because the way we should get this data is to loop through multiple items, and I will show you how to do that later on. But now let's just verify whether this works. So now let's just run it. We can see that the module outputted 2 bundles. The first one for the first first name and last name, and the second one for LeBron James. So yeah, it's working well. Now the next function that I want to show you is clear values from a range. And this effectively could work just like a clear row. So let's see how it works. So the range is A5, C5. Let's press OK. Then let's run it. Nice, it worked. Now we move on to the next functions, which allow you to manipulate sheets, which means adding a sheet, copying a sheet, renaming or deleting a sheet. Let's first add a sheet. So this function is very simple. It just needs the title of the new sheet that we'll be adding. I will just call it my new sheet. Press OK and then run it. So my new sheet has been added. Now let's see how copying a sheet works. Actually, this function takes the information from a sheet within a spreadsheet and then copy it into another sheet. So let's see how it works. First, you select the origin spreadsheet ID from where we will be copying the data. Make sure to select the right sheet name. So here what we'll be doing is that we'll be copying the data from our sheet 1 into the same spreadsheet and adding a new sheet which we'll just be calling copy of sheet 1 basically. Then you press OK. Let's run it. Okay, so copy of sheet 1 has been created and we can see that the exact same data is there. We can also decide to rename the sheet if we don't like its name. So let's do it. So here we'll be renaming a copy of sheet 1 into, for example, sheet 1 underscore 2. We press OK. Let's run it. Okay, you can see that the sheet has been renamed. And finally, if you decide that you don't want a sheet anymore, you can delete it. So here let's just delete this newly created sheet. And then you run it. Okay, great, it is deleted. Meg.com also allows you to create a spreadsheet. So there is actually two ways to do that. You can either create a new empty spreadsheet or do that via a template. So I will show you how to do that in both ways. Let's first start the simple way to create the spreadsheet. Here we should give it a title. I will call it new sheet with Meg.com. There is also an option to add new sheets. So I decided to add 2 new sheets and each one will have the title test 1 and test 2. So let's do that. Okay, it looks like that it has worked. Let's check on our Google Drive. A quick way to do that is just to click on File and then Open. Here we can see our new spreadsheet. Let's open it. We can see that the 2 sheets have also been created, test 1 and test 2. So now let's add a new spreadsheet, but in a more powerful way, in my opinion, which means creating a spreadsheet from a template. So select here, create a spreadsheet from a template. So now for Meg.com, what is a template? Actually, a template is just a normal, Google Sheet spreadsheet, but we can also fill it with variables, and actually we can set the values of those variables inside the spreadsheet when creating it. Which means that, for example, we can imagine having an invoice with some variables, for example, the amount charged, the date, the address of the client, its name, and so on. And then once we create the spreadsheet, we fill it with the right values, with the right data. So we'll just be doing a simple example through this simple template, but you can see how it can be very powerful actually. Here I will select this template spreadsheet that I created. And by the way you create variables inside a template is just the name of the variable without any space inside of it, surrounded by 2 curly braces. So now you can see that once we have selected the right template, Meg.com automatically detected the right variables to fill. We have num bookings and a no-show rate. So here, for example, let's say 100 number of bookings and a no-show rate of 20%. For the title of the new spreadsheet, let's call it new spreadsheets from template. And for the new documents location, just select the right location where you want to create the spreadsheet. This actually refers to the location inside your Google Drive. And then you press OK. Okay, let's run it. Okay, it seems that it has worked. Let's double check. As you can see, here is the newly created spreadsheet with its title, new spreadsheet from template. And of course here the right values instead of the variable names. Moving on to the next function, we can also list the sheets within a spreadsheet. So let's say you have a spreadsheet where in each tab you have leads for a specific city, or for example leads for a specific niche. Then you can iterate over all those tabs to do various functions for each tab. So here select list sheets. As usual, select the right spreadsheet that you'll be working on, and that's pretty much it. We can press OK. Let's run it. So if we look at the output from this module, we can see that here we have two results. Basically in Mega.com it's called bundle. We have bundle 1 and bundle 2. For each bundle we'll have the corresponding information related to a specific sheet. The two most important information that you need to know is the sheet ID and the title. And most of the time you will need more the sheet ID because it is a unique identifier that will allow you to manipulate that specific sheet basically. And here the way the sheet ID works is that in Google Sheets all the time the first sheet that is automatically created within a spreadsheet, it has as a sheet ID 0, but then starting from the second one created, it will be a random unique identifier. One of the most important functions in Google Sheets module is the ability to search rows. And there are two ways to do that. The first one is just searching rows, using a simple filter, and another one in a more advanced way. Let's do the simple one first. Here we want to return all the rows where the lead score is equal to 5. So here you should indicate that the table contains headers. The column range doesn't matter that much. I mean, as long as the range is within the range of your table. And then let's here focus on the filter. Here we can see that we can have access to multiple types of operators. The most important operators that you will most likely use are the text operators, the one that analyze text, the ones about numbers, so numeric operators, date time operators, boolean, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And for example, for the text operators, we can see that here for each one of them we have case insensitive. So this is basically just a computer science notion here, but case insensitive means that whether the characters are uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. So for example, let's say I choose the text operator equal to, and it is case insensitive. It means that those two strings, those two texts here are equal. However, if I choose the other operator, meaning equal to, without the dimension case insensitive, it will mean that those two texts here are not equal. Numeric operators are pretty self-explanatory. The datetime operators, so basically those are operators that take into account the date and the time, where we can choose to select the data if it is earlier than a specific date. And we can apply the same logic to manipulate time and compare some data if it is earlier than a specific time. So for our simple example, let's just select this text operator equal to, and here we'll select the column title lead score, and we'll select 5. This feature we can make it quite complex by adding and or logical operators. Another nice option is that we can sort, and we can choose whether we should sort by row number or by first name, last name, and so on. I chose not to select anything here just to make it simple. And for the maximum number of returned rows, if you don't know in advance how many rows you should return, just leave it empty. However, if you of course know how many rows, for example, if you know that for every single search there will be only one row matching what you want to return, just select one here, for example. And then let's press OK, and then let's run it. Okay, so we can see that it has worked because it has returned 3 bundles. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now let's move on to the more advanced search rows function and see how it works. Here to show you this advanced search rows function, I added some new data in this sheet here. And let's say, I don't know if it's the case, but let's say that American numbers start with 501 and Canadian numbers start with 502. And we only want to get the Canadian numbers, which means the ones that start with 502. So we can do that with this advanced, search rows function by creating a query. And this will look like an SQL or SQL query. I don't know if you are familiar with this type of language, but this looks a lot like, a regular SQL language that allows you to get data from, for example, MySQL or some other database servers. So here I will select the right sheet, my new sheet, and then for the query I will write some SQL. Of course, this is a bit advanced, but if you ever know some SQL language, then you can totally use it and get data from there using this advanced search function. So basically what we are trying to do with this function is that we are trying to get those three numbers here. This advanced search rows does not return the row numbers, it returns the actual data that we are trying to get. So the actual query that we need is select star where A like percentage 1502%. This query means that for column A, find me all the data where there is 1502 inside of it, which means whatever the data before and whatever the data after that, we do not care about it. Just find me every time there is 1502 inside of that text. Here for the maximum number of returned rows, just leave it empty. Let's click OK, then let's run it. So we can see that indeed it has returned 3 bundles containing the right numbers. Now we'll move on to functions related to conditional format rule. What it means is that if some data meets a specific condition, we'll change how it appears. It could be, for example, the color of the background cell, or whether it should be in bold or any other thing concerned its format basically. So for this specific example, I added some new data here and we will see how it will look like at the end. For this example, I added some new data here and basically we want to change the background color of those cells here depending on the value of the lead score. So here for the range, it should be from C2 up to C10. This option is actually interesting. It says the zero-based index where the rule should be inserted. So basically, if you have multiple conditional format rules within the same sheet, some rules can overshadow some other rules. So it's important, to have some type of priority of those rules. And it also says here that it is zero-based index, which means that the first rule has index 0, the second rule has index 1, and so on. So let's just write 0 here. Here we can see that for the format rule, we have 2 types of rules, the Boolean and the gradient. So the Boolean is basically using some operators, some Boolean operators to specify a condition so that we will make the changes based on that condition. For the gradient rule, basically it will apply some coloring based on a minimum color and a maximum color, and any value between those 2 colors will be basically colored in a shade that is going from the minimum to the maximum. To make things simple for this course, let's just go with the Boolean rule. For our example, let's make all the cells between 0 and 5 to be turned red. Okay, I think this color is fine. Let's check what are the corresponding RGB values for this red. I actually have a Chrome extension here where, for example, it displays the RGB values wherever the mouse pointer is. I pasted those values in this color picker here. We can see that the RGB values are those ones. Now for the condition, we should select number between, and here for value 1, let's say 0, for value 2, 5. Here for the color, let's select RGB color. Now we need to input the right red, green, blue and alpha colors. Let's start with alpha. This alpha means the level of opacity. So we want full opacity, so let's write 1. For the red, green and blue values, here we should not input the same values, because here those values are expected to be between 0 and 1, and normally the RGB values of any colors are numbers between 0 and 255. So in order to translate this number to a number between 0 and 1, we should divide that number by 255. So if we divide 224 by 255, we get this value. So we should input it in the red input here. Let's now do the same for the rest of the values. We don't want to change the foreground color, as well as whether the text should be in italic, bold and so on. So let's just click on OK. Before running the automation, I will just clear the formatting here. Okay, let's run the automation. Okay, so you can see that it has worked. So basically, concerning the condition, when we say, hey, we want all the cells between 0 and 5, it means 0 and 5 included. So as you can see here, also the cells that are equal to 5 will be colored in red. You can repeat the same process by adding some other Google Sheets module. Specifically, they add a conditional format rule to colorize all the other cells. So for example, from 5 to 8, let's make it orange, and from 8 to 10, let's make it green. Now we can also delete this conditional format rule programmatically. Let's do it. Here, as you can see, the only input that we need is the index of the rule, which means that whenever you create a conditional format rule, its index is very important. You should write it down somewhere. So now let's write 0 here. Let's press OK and let's run it. Okay, great, it has been deleted. Now we move on to an important part of the course, which is looping over a list of items. And previously we have seen how to search for rows, how to list sheets, how to also get a range of values. We will see how we can basically get those items, those bundles, and iterate through them one by one. It is important to know how to do that, because let's say you have a sheet made of leads, and each lead has its own number, and you would like to get the number to call it automatically. So it is very important to know how to iterate and loop over all those numbers. So here I have added this column number, and let's pretend that we'll be going through over those leads, and we'll be calling all of them, which means that our automation should loop 3 times. Let's first do that through the search rows function. Basically, we want all the numbers, meaning all the items in column D that contain something, basically. And the way to do that through this filter is that we should state we're looking for data in column D not equal to empty string. Actually, Meg.com wants you to specify really clearly that you're not looking for empty string, meaning that if you leave this input empty, it will not work, and you should very specifically say empty string. Now let's leave the rest as it is and press OK. Now the key elements to loop over a list of bundles from a search result are the array aggregator and the iterator. Those are 2 Meg.com operators. Let's see how they work. Basically, this is the array aggregator. Let's click on it. So actually the way it works is very simple. It will create an array or a list of stuff, and depending on the results that it gets from the module right before, it will fill each element inside this array in the right position basically. So let's say if we get 50 results from our previous module, from the Google Sheets module, it will create an array which has size 50, so that it will put each element inside this array. So now we should indicate to Meg.com over which field we would like to aggregate data, and we want to do it over this column D, the number. So let's select here number, and then let's click OK. So now that we aggregate information over an array, we need another key element that will allow us to loop over all the elements inside that array. And this element is the iterator. So the way the iterator works is that for each element, we will do some operations, and then we'll move on to the next element. And then we'll do some operations, and then we'll do that until the end of the array basically. So this iterator only needs the array from this aggregator. So let's click on it, and then let's click on OK. The next module that we'll be using is just a dummy HTTP request. It could be in reality a call, like an AI API call via VAPI or Blend AI or Retail AI. So let's do it now. And the URL endpoint that we'll be using is this dummyjson.com. Actually, this is a pretty handy URL because it allows you to test your API calls. Here, let's search for HTTP. Then let's select make a request. The URL will be dummyjson.com/test. The method is a post. The body type doesn't matter, so let's just select row here. For the content type, it will be text, plain. For the request content, it will be number D. Let's press OK. Okay, so we can see that this module here has run 3 times. So let's actually see what happened. We can see that for the first operation, this is the number that has been sent. For the second operation, it is this number, 952, which corresponds to this. And for the third operation, it is also this number, 6396, which corresponds to this number. Now we'll do the same thing, but instead of search rows, we'll use get range values instead. For the range, it will be D2 to D4. And let's press OK. For the array aggregator, we should select D here. Let's press OK. And let's run it again. So once again, it has worked because we can see that this operation has run 3 times. Now we'll do the same thing, but using the list sheets function. Here actually you should select sheet ID and unselect this, and then let's press OK. Then let's run it. Sorry, I actually made a little mistake. Here we should have changed the data by sheet ID. So let's select sheet ID here. Let's press OK. And then let's run it again. Okay, we can see that again this scenario has run 2 times. However, for operation 1, the request content is 0, which is the sheet ID of the first sheet. And then for the second operation, this is the request content, which is the ID of the second sheet. So yeah, it's running well. Now we'll move on to some more advanced functions. Those 2 that you can see here, perform a function and perform a function responder. Actually, those 2 functions work hand in hand. First, it needs the Meg.com add-on that we installed previously. And the way it works is very simple. Here as an input, we'll have some data from Google Sheets. This data will be passed on to Meg.com to do whatever data manipulation that we want. And then the result from this make automation will be then passed to the same Google spreadsheet. Let's see in practice how it works. I prepared here some data where we want to convert Canadian dollar to US dollar via a function. So here we should select perform a function. We will need to create a webhook for this, so let's click on this. Name the webhook whatever you want, and then let's click on save. Let's copy this webhook URL, and here in the extensions, let's go to settings. So just ignore this part because this is reserved to the watch changes function, and let's focus on this area which is reserved to the perform a function. Let's paste the webhook URL and let's save the settings. In Make we have a module called currency, which basically just converts an amount from a currency to another currency. So here it is, let's click on it. So here what is interesting is actually the type of information that we can pass, meaning the information that we get from the Google Sheet. And we can see that we have here up to 15 parameters. This means that we can send up to 15 data points from our spreadsheet to Meg.com. So here, since we'll be sending only one data point at a time, let's select only the first parameter. So just click on parameter 1 here, and we want to convert this from CAD to USD. So let's here select CAD, and then let's click on OK. Now the next module that we need is perform a function responder. The reason we need this responder is that this is the actual module that sends the data back to the spreadsheet. Here you can select whether the response type should be a text or a number. Depending on your use case, you could select either one of these, but for our simple case, let's just select text. And here for the value, it should be amount in output currency. And let's select OK. And here, in order to activate this perform a function within your spreadsheet, you should use either equal make function or here integromat. So let's just use integromat, and its input should be this cell here, A2. So now it should output an error, which is normal. Our scenario is not running yet. So let's run it and let's trigger this again. Let's run it now. Okay, we can see that the amount has been converted. So here let's test the other function, which is called equal make function. So let's here write equal make function. Let's here specify the cell, which is A3. And before hitting enter, let's run this. So run once, and then here let's hit enter. Okay, so the amount has been converted. Okay, now the cool thing is that if you activate this scenario by clicking here and then you drag and drop this result, the amounts will be automatically converted, and this can be very handy actually. Now that we've seen how this perform a function works, let's apply it to a more realistic scenario where we'll want to do some sentiment analysis on product reviews from an e-com store. So here I prepared some data where we have 10 products, and for each product we have the category, the title, the review text, and a column for the sentiment of this review. So the way we'll adapt our make scenario is that here, instead of using this currency module, we'll be using ChatGPT, and we'll basically feed it with our review, and we'll prompt it to output a sentiment that will appear in this column here. Here for the model, I will be selecting GPT-4o, and this is the prompt that I wrote. I will give you a review of a product purchased by a customer, and you should perform sentiment analysis for the review. If you think the review is negative, output -1. If you think the review is neutral, output 0, and if it is positive, output 1. You should only output a number, not extra words, sentence, or text. Output the number only. Here's the review. And for the data, we'll just pass the first parameter of our function. Of course, for the max tokens, as usual, just write 0 here, and then you press OK. Here for the value that will be written back to the spreadsheet, we'll just select the result here. First, we'll use the formula equal make function, but before pressing enter, we need to first run the scenario. and then here we press enter. Okay, so now it seems that the review is positive because it has outputted 1. Let's check if it is indeed the case. So the review was, when least you think so, this project will save the day. Just keep it around just in case you need it for something. So yeah, it seems that it's working well. Just like we did previously, let's apply the same function to the rest of the reviews. I will select this cell here and then drag and drop on the other cells. Okay, cool, so it's working well. Okay, so now we move on to the more advanced part of the course, and my personal favorite actually, which is making an API call. And here it says perform an arbitrary authorized API call. And this is the most powerful way actually to interact with Google Sheets because it allows you to do so much more things. What you also need to know is that all those actions that you can see here, under the hood, they use Google API. So they all use this make an API call. So let's select make an API call. Here, as usual, you should connect it with your Google account. So the most important part in this function is to actually know what to write here. And this is a URL, which is part of the Google Sheets API. It is also called an endpoint. Think of an endpoint just as a link, that you will use to call some services from Google servers. Basically, what this function does is that it sends some requests to Google servers asking, hey, I want to make this background cell red, or hey, all those cells, merge them please. And then this function will be performed on the spreadsheet and there will be some response from the server. It could be, okay, everything has worked properly, I've done what you requested. Otherwise, it could be 404, I didn't understand this request, or this request does not exist, and so on and so forth. Now the first question is, what should we write in this URL in practice? So to do that, just type in Google, Google Sheets API, then click on the first link, then click on a reference, and here in this page we can actually see all the endpoints, the URLs that can be written in the meg.com module. So here, for example, for this V4 spreadsheets, we can have the batch update, which means applies one or more updates to a spreadsheet. We can see that it is a post, and this is the actual URL to write in meg.com. Of course, you'll have to replace this spreadsheet ID by your own spreadsheet ID. You can also create a spreadsheet by using this URL. Here, if you scroll down a little bit, we can see that there is a URL about the values, the data sent to a spreadsheet. For example, here we can append something to a spreadsheet via this URL here. Most of those endpoints have a post as a method. However, some endpoints use some other methods. For example, here the update uses a put. Now, one nice tool that we have in this documentation is that we can play with those endpoints right from Google's website. So let's say, for example, I click on this batch update endpoint. Here it says try it. So just click on it. Here, first of all, it asks for the spreadsheet ID. So the way you get a spreadsheet ID from your spreadsheet, it's super simple. Actually, it is written here. Right after /d/, then you can copy this part, then you can paste it here. And here, this endpoint needs some request body parameters. And for example, for this endpoint batch update, we can see that here it is expecting a list of requests, as you can see. So let's see what kind of request we can actually trigger through this endpoint. Let's open this request into a new tab. We can see that there are all types of requests that you can do. For example, a request to delete a sheet, to copy and paste, to merge cells, and there are more sophisticated requests like adding a chart. The nice thing about this tool is that it will basically guide you on how to build a proper request for Google Sheets servers. So if you click here, it will say request. So yes, indeed we want to perform a request. So just click on it. then if you click, we should add an item to this request, because you can have multiple requests batched at the same time. So just click on add item. Then here when you click, it will prompt you with all the possible types of requests. For example, here add a chart, add a sheet, autofill, copy paste, delete duplicates, and so on. Now we start to understand why this API is so powerful, because you can do so many things. We'll actually see how this works in details through multiple examples. Now, another foundational knowledge that you need to know in order to work with this API is how the grid system in Google Sheets work. Because many times when you will want to manipulate this API, you will have to provide a range, meaning like an area inside your spreadsheet where you will want to manipulate data. So now a range for Google Sheets means a bounding box. And the way it is defined is through the indexes of the columns and the rows. And this indexing is zero based. So what does this mean in practice is that, so this first line here is at index 0. This one here is at index 1. And then 2, and then 3, and so on. And concerning the columns, it is the exact same way. So here this is index 0, index 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now the 4 data points that Google Sheets needs in order to define a range are the following ones. So start row index, end row index, start column index, and end column index. So let's say I want to manipulate this range here. For example, I want to change its background color. So let's define those 4 data points for this range. Let's define the start row index. So we should count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here it should be 4. For the end row index, it is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here it should be 10. For the start column index, let's count it. 0, 1, 2, 3. So here it should be 3. And for the end column index, it should be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here it is 7. So now that you understood this, it will be very simple in the future to basically manipulate any type of range. Now, instead of modifying a whole area, we want to modify only one cell. For example, changing its text or its background color. So the same principle applies. So here for the start row index, it should be 0, 1. For the end row index, it should be 2. For the start column index, it should be 1 as well. And for the end column index, it should be 2 as well. Another thing that you need to know is that sometimes the range that will be needed will not be specified through this start column index and so on. It will just written in a very simple way. For example, if we want to update some information inside this cell, then the range specified will be sheet 1 exclamation mark A1. However, if we want to update a range of data, it should be the exact same thing, but instead of A1, here it should be from A1 to C3. If it is a bit confusing, I mean, when should we be using the first way of defining a range and when should we be using this way? Don't worry about it. It will be very simple at the end once we'll start getting into some examples. Now, before we start viewing some examples, there is a third thing that you should know, which is how the sheet system works. Once you create a spreadsheet, it will by default have a first sheet, which is usually called sheet 1, and its ID is 0. However, starting from the second sheet that you have in a spreadsheet, whether it is created programmatically or manually, the sheet ID will not be something predictable. It will be generated dynamically every time with a random number. So the way to get it is just to use the list sheets via meg.com, or there is actually an endpoint via Google Sheets API that allows you to list all the sheet IDs in a specific spreadsheet. So now let's start with a simple example where we want to add some data to a spreadsheet. So it is done through this update endpoint, It is all the way down here. Just click on it. So here you can see that the API Explorer automatically opens up. And actually the easiest way to go from Google Sheets API to Meg.com is to first test your request through this API Explorer, and once everything is working well on this Explorer, we transition into Meg.com by just using the same data that has been sent. I will do it and you will see that it is very easy actually. What we'll do for this example is that we'll just write some data in cell A1. So what this request needs is a spreadsheet ID and a range. So here the spreadsheet ID, you should take it from your spreadsheet. For the range here, let's write sheet1 exclamation mark A1. For the request body parameters, let's click on it and then let's click on range. So this range should exactly match the range that you write here. So just copy this and paste it here. And then let's click on the next element, which is values. So values is just what you want to actually write inside this cell. So click here, add item. And since it is text that we want to write, we should use the double quotes. Here, for whatever reason, once you write some double quotes, it adds those braces here. Just get rid of them. And then here inside those double quotes, just write whatever you want to write in your spreadsheet. So here I will write my new value. So here normally it should work. So let's click on execute. Here of course it will prompt you with your Google accounts. Of course choose the Google account where your Google Sheet is opened. Okay, so this is interesting. Actually I made this mistake on purpose to show you what happens whenever things might go wrong. So here we have an error 400 with the status invalid argument. What it means is that it is missing something. And here in the message it says value input option. It is required but not specified. If you scroll up, we will see this option, value input option. Actually, I noticed that in terms of UI, this API Explorer should need some improvement. So first here we have this mistake from Google designers of not coloring in red the border of this input to make it mandatory. We also have this little mistake where whenever you add a new value, it adds up some random braces. So if there are some Google designers watching this video, please guys do something here. So for this value input option, let's click on it. We can see that there are multiple options. The safest option to choose is user entered, meaning we are just simulating the way you would enter new data manually. So just click on it and then execute again. Okay, cool. So if everything works well, you should receive a 200 response. And we can see here that this value has been added in the right spreadsheet in the right cell. Okay, so now that everything has worked, the question is, okay, how do we make it work on Meg.com? Because we want to use Meg.com, we don't want to use this API Explorer, right? So there are multiple things that we should be using from this page to craft your request properly so that it will work perfectly. So the first thing is about the URL. So this is the actual URL that we'll be using. So here there's a little note that says enter a path relative to https sheets.googleapis.com/v4/, meaning that we should not rewrite this part. We should write everything after this part, meaning that we should write this part of the URL actually. So let's copy it. Let's paste it. Now we can see that here we need to write some data instead of this spreadsheet ID and range. So for the spreadsheet ID, you already know it, right? Let's paste it. Now for the range, let's also write it. So it is sheet1 exclamation mark A1. For the method, as you can see here, there are multiple options, but the way to know exactly what method to use, it is simple. It is actually written here. So the method to use is put. So here you should select put. So now this option that you can see here, value input option, it is called a request parameter. So the way to add that is by clicking here, add parameter. So the key is the name of that option, which is value input option. And for the value, it is the option that we chose here. So it should be user underscore entered. Make sure that it is all uppercase. Now the request body should be exactly this. Now there are multiple ways to do that. One simple way that I found is by first creating a JSON. Let's do that. So here search for JSON and click on create JSON. Here select add, name it whatever you want. I wrote here add value sheets API. For the specification, just click on generate. Now the way it works is that Meg.com will generate a JSON structure based on the data that you provide. So for the sample data, it is very simple. What we'll be writing here is this content here. So you just copy it here by clicking and then paste it here and then click on generate. Then click on save. So here you can see that it will automatically prompt you with the information that it needs. So for the range, let's copy this and paste it here. For the values, let's write here my value from Meg.com. And then let's press OK. Another reason why do we create a JSON is that you will be saving a data structure, meaning that if you want to reuse it multiple times afterwards, well, you'll just have to retrieve it and then use the same data structure for your next requests. So here we should click again on Google Sheets module, and for the body we should just be using the JSON that we just created. So click here on JSON string, then click OK. Then let's run it. Okay, great, it has worked. The next thing that we'll be seeing is how to change some cell format, specifically how to change the background color of a cell via the Google Sheets API. So the most straightforward way to do that is actually through the batch update endpoint. And actually this endpoint is very useful for so many things. So even if you hesitate between some endpoints and you don't know actually which one to use, it's safer to use just this one. So now I open the API Explorer, and what we need as parameters are the spreadsheet ID and the request body. So as usual, let's first make it work via the API and then transition, all the parameters to Meg.com. So I take the sheet ID from here, then paste it here. Okay, for the request body parameters, let's see how it works. First, we need some requests. So let's click on requests. Then let's add an actual request. So let's add an item. Here the type of request that we will be using is called repeat cell. Normally it is used if we want to apply the same effect on multiple cells. However, now let's do it for only one cell. So click on repeat cell. And here you can see that this repeat cell option needs three information: cell, fields, and range. But before defining those, let's see first how we'll colorize actually our cell. So let's focus on A1, and we'll be trying to colorize it with this color here. Back to the API Explorer, let's first define the range. So click on range here. For the range, you can see that we need 5 items. So those are the items that we talked about previously. For the sheet ID, it will be 0 because this is our very first sheet in our spreadsheet. For the start row index, it will be 0. For the end row index, it will be 1. For the start column index, it will be 0. And for the end column index, 1 as well. Now the second thing that we need is the cell. And this information actually defines what you want to do with this cell. Do you want to change its text format, or put it in italic, or change the font size? In this case, we'll be changing the background color. After you click on it, you can see that you have multiple options here. And in order to change the format of a cell, you should click on user entered format. And here you can see that you have multiple options: background color, borders, horizontal alignment, and so on. But we are interested into the background color. Now this item needs 4 options. Of course, the red, green, and blue colors, and the alpha. The alpha option is not mandatory, and I think by default it is set to 1. So just don't mind about it. Now let's focus on what will be the values for these red, green, and blue colors. I would advise you to generally always order them in this order, because whenever you see a color specification, it is always in this order: red first, green second, and blue third. So now I will use my magic color picker extension to see what kind of color is this. So now we have it copied in the clipboard. Okay, so after I paste it here, I have now the values of the RGB. But of course we know that for Google Sheets API, those values should be between 0 and 1. So as we did previously, we should divide each one of those values by 255. So for example, for the red, it should be 118 divided by 255, which is this value. Okay, so after you do the same for the green and blue colors, you come up with those values here. Now the third option that is mandatory is the fields. And here you are telling to Google Sheets servers which type of modification we are talking about for this specific request. And for us, it is this one, user entered format. So you should click here, and then here you should specify user entered format. Okay, first I will clear the formatting from here. Then let's run it. Okay, it has been colored, so it's working well. Now we need to make it work on meg.com. Previously I showed you how to do it via the creation of a JSON. I will also show you a simpler way actually to do that, in my opinion, is via the creation of a variable. So here what you need to do is to select set variable. For the variable name, you can name it whatever you want. For the value of this variable, we're gonna copy what is inside this request here, this request body, and paste it here. Then click OK. For the URL, this is the one to use. For the method, it should be a post, as you can see here. For the parameter, there is no parameter actually to add for this specific endpoint. And for the body, let's use the variable that we just created. Here, let's see if it works. Okay, great, it works. Now for our third example, we're gonna make some cells in bold. So I prepared some data, and we're gonna make those column names in bold basically. So it will also be done to the batch update endpoint. So let's see how it works now. We're gonna also be using repeat cell. Let's first start with the range. The sheet ID is pretty obvious, it is 0. For the start row index, it is 0 because it starts at 0, right? For the end row index, it is 1 because it ends at 1, as you can see here. For the start column index, it is 0 as well because it starts here. However, for the end column index, it is 3 because here you can count 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're gonna specify the cell part. So click on cell, and here it will also be user entered format. Here the boldness is part of the text format, so click on it. Here click on bold. So here the option bold is what we call a boolean, meaning it's either true or false. So by default it will be written false, but change it to true. And concerning the fields option, you should select user entered format. As usual, let's double check that it works. Okay, it has worked, and now as we've done with our second example, let's make it work on meg.com. As in our second example, we'll be using the variable setting option, which I think is very easy and very straightforward to understand. So here you copy this request body, you paste it here, you click on OK. Okay, now if you do whatever we've done previously, it should work perfectly. So yeah, nice, it is working. So now we're gonna up our game a little bit and add a chart to a spreadsheet automatically via the Google Sheets API. And to do that, I will actually use a sample that was provided by Google. I will also include this link in the MEGAPACK so that you will be able to access it and play with those samples. So this sample needs this table for it to work. So let's first write this data into our spreadsheet. So this is what I did here. Now let's focus on requests that produce this line graph here. We can see that they did that using this endpoint, the batch update endpoint. So let's see in more details how this request works. So first we can see that the type of request is called add chart. Then here this spec needs that we need to specify a bunch of stuff in order to create this chart. First here we specify the type of the chart. Here we can say line, however I think there are many other options like columns or stacked bars or something like that. The first important part of this specification is the domains option. It basically says how we're gonna write the labels inside that chart, whether it is on the x-axis or the y-axis. So let's see what those ranges correspond to. So we can see that if we go from the rows 0 to 3 and from the columns 0 to 1, it is actually this range that we're talking about. And for the second source, if we go from the 5th row to the 7th row and from the 0th column to the 1st column, it is actually this range that we're talking about. And those two sources correspond to those labels that you can see here. Now the second option that is important is the series, meaning what is the actual data that we're gonna write inside this chart. And you should note that we have two sources here. So we should also have two series here. So this series corresponds to this range here, and this series corresponds to this data here. Now moving on to the position, you can actually choose where to place this chart. And you can specify the sheet ID, the row index, and the column index. So here, since both the row and the column index are 8, the top left corner of the graph will be here. So basically it will be kind of a square that starts at row index and column index 8. Before copying this request and writing it in make.com, we should edit something. We should specify the sheet ID here. Okay, after you added the sheet ID, let's copy the sample. Paste it in our API Explorer and then execute it to make sure that it works. Once it works, just do exactly what we've done previously. So now you can see that I just pasted the request body text and then press OK. Okay, now I've done exactly what we did previously. Let's press OK and run the make.com scenario. Okay, we can see that the chart has been created. Great. Moving on to our fifth example, we're going to do some conditional formatting using the Google Sheets API. Previously, we have used the repeat cell request, but for this particular example, we're going to be using the add conditional format rule. For this example, I prepared some data here, and we're going to be doing exactly what we've done via the make.com module. However, we're going to do it through the Google Sheets API. Let's see how it works. So here you should select the rule option. Let's select the Boolean rule. For the condition, you have two types of options. You have the type and the values. For the type, it is all the logical operators that you have seen in the make.com module. So here we should select number between. And here once you select values, based on those square brackets, you can see that it is a list. So you can actually put multiple values. But here, of course, for the type number between, we are expecting to have two values. We should set it as user entered value, and for the value it should be 0. Let's add another item. Here for the upper bound we should set 5. Now the format option actually dictates how the change will be done. So here we should select background color, and as usual select the red, green and blue options. Okay, so now for the ranges we should specify where we want to apply those changes. And here it is pretty obvious that the start column index is 0, the end column index is 1, the start row index is 0, and for the end row index it will be 11. Now we want to apply this rule 3 times. One for the red color, one for the orange color, and one for the green color. So one option to do that is here all the way before the end of the array, to click here to add an item, which will basically just add a new request. So you can either, do add conditional format rule and do the same thing again. However, one faster way is just to copy whatever we wrote before our previous request here, and then to paste it and adapt the numbers. So I will be copying this request here. Here you should add a comma and then paste the second request. Here the things to change in this second request are those values that you can see here. So instead of 0 and 5, we will put 5 and 8. We will also change this color, and instead of having it red, we will set a nice shade of orange. Okay, those are the values that I came up with for the orange color. Now let's do it a third time for the green color. Here you should set the numbers from 8 to 10. Okay, now that we are done, let's run it. Okay, nice, it has worked well, so let's put it now on Meg.com. As usual, we'll be copying this information here. Paste it here. Click on OK. Okay, nice. Okay, for our sixth example, we're gonna see how we can sort tables using the Google Sheets API. For this example, I prepared this data and I put this table here on purpose, and you will see why in a few moments. In this example, we're gonna be sorting this table based on the score. And we want those rows to be sorted in descending order, meaning we want the biggest scores first. So the type of request we'll be using for this example is the sort range request. Here we should specify the range. So the range basically consists of all the table that you want to sort. So the start column index is 2 and the end column index is 5. The start row index is 0 and the end row index is 9. Now let's specify how the sorting should be made. So the two most important options that you need here are the sort order and dimension index. So the sort order, let's click on it, and we can see that we have three options. So the one that we'll be using is the ascending order. The dimension index means we want to sort based on which column, because let's imagine you have like a table and multiple columns have values, like have numbers. So we want to sort based on which column. So the columns here are 0 based, which means that this is the first column at index 0, index 1 and so on. So we want to sort it based on this column. This column has index 4, so we should write 4 in that option. First, let's take a screenshot of how the table looks like now, so that we can compare it with how it will look like after the sorting. Okay, so let's run the request. Okay, sorry guys, I actually made two mistakes here. First of all, the sorting should not be ascending, it should be descending. And here for the range, we should not include the columns. So here in the range, I also included, those columns, they should not be included actually. So here we should simply put 1 instead of 0. Let's run it again. Okay, great, we can see that everything has been sorted. Now you need to do exactly what I've done in the previous examples to basically make this automation work on Meg.com. I guess no need to do that again, right? Okay, in our seventh and last example, I'm pretty sure it will be useful for many of you. It will be to export into a PDF a Google Sheet that we have. And for this example, I prepared like a dummy invoice, document that will be exporting as a PDF. Being able to export a Google spreadsheet into a PDF is good. However, once we have a file, it's not good enough. We need to do something with that file. So I will show you an automation where basically we get a spreadsheet, turn it into a PDF, and then send it by email via Gmail basically. So the first thing that you want to do is to change the access properties of that spreadsheet. And instead of keeping it private, you should basically make it accessible to the public. So here it is already the case for this document, but I will show you how to do it in my other documents. So basically you will click on share here, and here you will click on anyone with the link. Here just set it as a viewer and then press done. So this icon will change, and instead of a lock, you will see this globe here. After you've done that, it means that if you visit a specific link on the web that contains your spreadsheet ID, then your browser will automatically download it as a PDF. So this is the link that I'm talking about. If I paste the link and press enter, my browser will download it, and once I open it, it will be exactly the same data as in your spreadsheet. So here the first module that we'll need is the HTTP, and more specifically the getAFile function. For the URL, you will paste the link that I just showed you and then press OK. Now we'll need the Gmail module, and more specifically the send an email function. Now if you have not created a connection with Gmail previously, you should follow this tutorial, which you can access by clicking on this link. Basically, this tutorial is about sending a mail if you have an @Gmail or an @Google Mail account. Just make sure that you follow this tutorial exactly. It is pretty straightforward. The most important information that you need at the end are the client ID and the client secret. Why do we need them? Because we need to write them here in this input. Okay, after signing in, I just did a quick test by just sending an empty email to make sure that the connection is working. So here in the subject, just write, for example, your invoice. As an attachment, you have two options: either HTTP getAFile, which will automatically just get, the file from the previous module, but also the name of the file will automatically be the one of your spreadsheet. I don't actually advise you to use this option. You should rather choose the map option, and for the file name, just name it whatever you want, but make sure that you are including .pdf at the end. So here let's just name it, for example, awesomeinvoice.pdf, and for the data it will be the data from the previous module. And then you press OK. Okay, let's run it now. Okay, great, we just received the mail. So here, if we click on the PDF, there you go. Okay guys, so now we move on to the two challenges that I told you about. I will not show you how to do them, but I will explain you what you should be doing. So the first challenge for you would be to display this graph, the NVIDIA stock close price. And I want you to display it from the date of the 1st January 2022 up to the 9th of August 2024. The date should appear in this specific format, and the graph should look like this and located in this specific position. The second challenge for you will be much harder. In one of my videos, I showed you an AI voice receptionist ROI analysis. So your job will be to reproduce exactly this sheet. I will include this sheet in my MEGAPACK so that you will know exactly what kind of elements you need to reproduce. But just here know that, for example, here all those cells should have this color as background color. Or for example, these columns here are resized. You should also know that some cells use formulas, meaning that this cell I changed it from 0.5 to 0.6, and the rest of the data changed as well. Another thing to note here is that those cells are merged. So there are many things, to pay attention to if you want to nail down this sheet. But if you can successfully reproduce this Google Sheet, you will be able to master Google Sheets API. The two blueprints of those challenges will be inside my MEGAPACK. But if you want me to create another video dedicated to those challenges, make sure to comment down below. Alright guys, that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do the same thing for another software. For example, a full course on how to link Meg.com with Notion. Don't forget that all I've showed you will be available in my Discord server, in the resources channel. And actually the link to join will be in the description or in the pinned comment. By the way, with my AI agency we can develop any type of AI and automation system. If you want to do so, book a meeting with me through the Calendly link in the description. If you like this video, make sure to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell. It will really help my channel. Also, if you have any questions, make sure to ask them. I will be answering you. Peace.